I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just reaching past the hallway closet to grab my cardigan when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice drift through the cracked bathroom door. She was on the phone. The water was running, but not loud enough. "She just takes over every room she walks into," she said. "You know how she is. Always rearranging things. Moving my stuff around like this is still her house." A pause, then a laugh, low and practiced. "Well, technically, I guess it kind of is. That's the whole problem." I stood very still. My hand was still on the closet door handle. The cardigan could wait. "My mother-in-law means well," she continued, "but she doesn't realize how exhausting it is, like having a house guest who never checks out, and she's always just there, watching. You walk into the kitchen, and she's already sitting at the table, hands folded, waiting. It's like living with a chaperone." I eased my hand off the handle. I walked back to my room at the end of the hall, the one with the window that faced the side yard, not the garden. I closed the door quietly, the way I had learned to do everything in this house quietly, carefully, without disturbing the air. "My name is Dorothy. I am 67 years old. I have been living in this house for 14 months, and until that moment, I thought I was at least tolerated." I sat on the edge of the bed. The same quilt my mother made was folded at the foot of it, the one thing in the room that felt entirely mine. I smoothed a corner of it with my palm and thought about how I had written the check for this house. Not part of it, all of it. Let me explain how that happened, because the answer matters, and it is not complicated. My husband, Gerald, passed 4 years ago. He left me the house we had shared for 31 years, a modest place on Clement Street, with a porch swing and a fig tree in the back that he pruned every October. I sold it 8 months after he died because I could not keep watching his chair sit empty at the breakfast table. The sale gave me enough to live carefully for many years, if I was smart about it. My son, Nathan, had been married to Renee for 6 years by then. They had a daughter, my granddaughter, Bea, who was 4 at the time, and had just started calling me Grandma Dot with such seriousness that it made me feel chosen. Nathan called me in February, 2 years after Gerald passed. He said they had found a house, a good one, the kind of house that didn't come along often, 4 bedrooms, a yard, a school district worth the name. He said they had enough for the down payment, but the mortgage payment was going to stretch them thin, and they were thinking about renting out the 4th bedroom, and would I possibly— I did not let him finish. I wired him the full amount the following Tuesday. Not a loan, a gift, because he was my son, and because I had the money, and because Bea deserved a backyard. Nathan said, "Mom, this is too much. You have to let us pay you back." I said, "Buy me a decent coffee maker and we'll call it even." There was a condition, though one I never actually spoke aloud. I assumed we were family. I assumed that the gift was also an invitation, that some understanding existed between us that did not need to be stated, that I would always have a place in that home, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged there. I moved in 11 months later, after a diagnosis that turned out to be less serious than the word sounded, but that still required rest and close monitoring. Renee suggested it herself. "Of course she should stay with us," I heard her tell Nathan in the kitchen, when they thought I was asleep in the car. "We have the room. She shouldn't be alone." I believed her. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was thinking that my usefulness would protect me. I cooked 4 nights a week. I picked Bea up from school every Tuesday and Thursday. I stayed up late folding laundry when Renee had her work deadlines. I remembered everyone's appointments. I kept a list on the refrigerator with the pediatric checkups and the dentist and the dates of Nathan's work travel, and I crossed things off in neat lines, and I never asked for credit or even acknowledgement. I was useful. I believed that was enough. But the room assignments shifted around month 3. My craft supplies moved from the 3rd bedroom to the garage. My cooking shows were never on when I came downstairs. The coffee maker I had specifically asked for, the one small thing, was replaced after 8 months with a sleek machine Renee had seen in a magazine, and the old one went to Goodwill without anyone asking if I wanted it. I started noticing the replacements. My dish towels swapped out for new ones I didn't recognize. The ceramic fruit bowl I had placed on the counter, a blue one from a shop in Savannah that Gerald and I had visited on our anniversary, moved to a high shelf, then eventually to a box in the garage, labeled Miscellaneous Kitchen. I kept adapting. That is what I had been trained to do, across 67 years of being a woman in rooms that belong to other people. You make yourself fit. You tuck in your corners. You smile when the fruit bowl disappears and tell yourself it doesn't matter. But the day I stood at the hall closet and heard myself described as a house guest who never checks out, I understood something that had been forming in me for months. I was not welcome. I was simply present. And those are very different things. I did not cry. I have never been much of a crier. Instead, I pulled the quilt onto my lap, sat in the half-light of the side yard window, and started thinking clearly for the first time since I moved in. 3 nights later, I went to the hall closet for a different reason. I was looking for the extra blankets. Renee kept telling me she'd moved them, and I kept forgetting where. I opened the closet and found the blankets on the top shelf, pushed back behind a row of decorative baskets I had never seen before. I found something else while I was searching, a manila folder tucked into the inner pocket of a tote bag hanging from the hook. The bag was mine, a canvas one, from a garden center I used to go to back home. I had not seen it in months. I thought I had left it somewhere. I pulled it out, set it on the closet shelf, and looked inside. There was a real estate printout, the address of this house, an estimated current market value, annotated in Renee's handwriting. A note that read, "If we refinance under both names, equity usable in 18 months, need to revisit original funding arrangement." I read that line 3 times. Revisit original funding arrangement. Beneath that page was a printout from a website I did not recognize, something about elder care transitions and family financial planning. One paragraph was highlighted in yellow. Information about how to establish conservatorship when an elderly family member becomes a financial liability. My age was written in the margin. 67. Circled. There was one more page. It was a printed email from Renee to a name I didn't recognize, a lawyer perhaps, with the subject line reading property question, time sensitive. The body of the email read, "She paid the full amount, but there's no formal agreement in writing. My husband is on the deed. I want to understand what that means for us going forward, if she becomes difficult or incapacitated." I folded everything back into the folder. I put the folder back into the bag. I hung the bag on the hook, found the blanket I had been looking for, and walked back to my room. I sat down and thought about the word incapacitated. I thought about what I had spent my life building: a marriage, a son, a family, a retirement that was supposed to feel like a rival. I thought about the fig tree at the house on Clement Street and how I had let it go so I could help my son build something new. Then I went to the desk drawer where I kept my personal papers, and I took out the one document I had never showed anyone in this house, the original deed, signed at closing. My name was not on it. I had known that at the time. I was writing a check, not taking an ownership stake. I had not thought I needed to. I understood now what I had not understood then. I called my friend Willa the next morning. We had known each other for 30 years, through husbands and moves and everything else. She answered on the second ring and did not ask questions when I said I needed to think something through. I told her everything. There was a silence on her end, and then she said, "Dorothy, do you remember what I told you about the Harlow place?" I did. Willa had been telling me about it for 2 years. A residence, she called it, though not in any way I had imagined. A collection of small houses clustered around a common green, designed for women who were done asking permission to exist. She had moved there herself the previous year, after her own situation had become unlivable. "Come see it," she said. "Just come see it." I went on a Wednesday, while Nathan was at work and Renee had a conference call and Bea was at school. I told no one where I was going. I put on the green wool coat I had not worn in over a year, one of those things I had stopped wearing because no one in the house ever commented. And eventually I started wondering if I was too much, and I drove myself for the first time in months. The Harlow place sat on 3 acres at the edge of town, behind a row of old oak trees that made the entrance feel like a threshold. There were 8 small houses arranged in a loose circle, each with a front step and a window box. A stone path connected all of them to a central building that Willa said housed the shared kitchen, a library, a sunroom, and 2 guest rooms for visitors. Willa met me at the gate. She looked better than I had seen her look in years. There was color in her face. She showed me around without rushing. We walked the path. She introduced me to a woman named Pearl who was transplanting irises in front of her door, and a woman named Claudette who waved from a lawn chair without looking up from her book. The air smelled like turned soil and something baking. We sat on Willa's front step for a long time, and she did not ask me to explain myself or justify anything. She just said, "There's a house coming available in 6 weeks. The woman who lived there is moving closer to her grandchildren in Oregon." I asked if the waiting list was long. She said, "I already told them about you. They're hoping you'll come." I drove home thinking about the word "they're hoping." It had been a long time since anyone had hoped for my presence, rather than simply accommodated it. That evening, I called a man named Alton, an attorney I had used years ago when Gerald and I drew up our wills. He had retired, but pointed me to his daughter, who had taken over his practice and who answered the phone with the same careful manner as her father. I told her what I had contributed to this house. I told her that my name was not on the deed. I told her about the folder in the closet and about the word incapacitated in the margin, written next to my age. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The contribution itself doesn't give you a legal claim to the property, but it does give you documentation of a significant financial transfer. If that transfer was made under an implied agreement specifically, that you would be provided housing in return, there may be an argument for a constructive trust." I said I was not interested in taking the house. I was interested in protecting myself. She said, "Then let's talk about what that looks like." We talked for 40 minutes. By the end of the call, I had an appointment for the following Monday and a short list of documents to gather. I wrote them down in my address book, in the careful handwriting I had used my whole life, then slid the list into the back pocket of the address book and put it in my purse. The next morning, I began going through my things in the way you go through things when you have decided to leave, not with urgency, but with clarity. I sat on the floor of my room for most of the morning, sorting what was mine, what I had brought, what I had accumulated in 14 months of trying to belong to a house that was never going to claim me. I packed slowly, over 2 weeks. Not every day. Some days I simply sorted, made a pile for the donation box, made a pile for the car. I was methodical about it. I had been an office manager for 22 years, and I know how to close things down without making a scene. No one noticed. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. Renee passed my open bedroom door 4 times during those 2 weeks. She glanced in each time, with the expression she always wore around me, not unkind, not kind either, just the face of someone managing a situation. She never asked why there were boxes. Nathan was traveling for work the second week. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway and said, "You doing okay, Mom?" I said, "I'm just organizing. You know how I get." He smiled and said, "Yeah, I do." And then he left, rolling his suitcase down the hall, and that was the last real conversation we had for quite some time. B was the hardest part. She had taken to knocking on my door in the evenings and sitting on the end of the bed while I read, not asking for anything, just keeping me company in the way that small children sometimes do when they know something needs keeping. She was 6 now, old enough to sense when the air changed. The Tuesday before I left, she came in while I was reading and climbed up beside me and said, "Grandma Dot, are you going somewhere?" I looked at her. Her face was so direct, the way children's faces are before they learn to hide things. I said, "I'm going to a new house, a very nice one, with a garden." She thought about that. Then she said, "Will there be room for me to visit?" I told her there would always be room for her. I told her that my new address would be on the refrigerator and she could come anytime she wanted, as long as someone brought her. I told her that the garden was going to have strawberries because I had already decided it would. She nodded with the gravity of someone accepting a treaty. Then she reached over and held my hand for a few minutes while I read, and then she slid off the bed and padded back down the hall. I did not sleep well that night, but not because I was uncertain. A Thursday, Nathan still traveling. Renee at her office for an early meeting, back by noon. B at school until 3. I had the house to myself from 7 until 11:30. I was dressed by 6:15. I made coffee, the last cup from the machine I had grown to tolerate, and I stood at the kitchen window and watched the light come up over the neighbor's fence. Then I set the mug in the sink, dried my hands, and began. Willa arrived at 7:45 with her car, and a man named Roy from the Harlow place. A quiet, steady man with a pickup truck, and no opinions about other people's situations. Between the three of us, we moved everything I was taking in 2 hours and 20 minutes. I did not take the furniture. None of it was mine. I took my clothing, my books, my mother's quilt, Gerald's reading lamp that I had somehow brought through 3 moves without losing it, my kitchen things, the ceramic bowls, the good knife, the measuring cups from the set my mother gave me, the blue fruit bowl from Savannah, which I retrieved from the box in the garage without ceremony, and the coffee maker that had been sent to Goodwill and which I had, quietly, driven to Goodwill myself one afternoon and bought back for $4. I took the photographs, all of them. Nathan, as a child. Nathan and Gerald at the fishing camp in Montana. B at 8 months, asleep on my chest. These belonged to me. They were documentation of the life I had actually lived. Before I left, I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes. I rinsed the coffee mug and placed it in the drying rack. I wiped the counter. I made sure the back door was locked. Then I took out the envelope I had prepared and placed it on the kitchen island, center, where it could not be missed. Inside was a single page, a photocopy of the bank transfer from the day I had wired Nathan the money for this house. The amount was in the upper right corner. Below it, in my own writing, a few sentences. I paid for this house because I believed it was also a home for me. I have since learned otherwise. I have found a place that is. I hope you will use what I gave you well. Do not contact me until you have thought carefully about what I am owed not legally, but as a matter of conscience. My new address is with my attorney. B knows the garden will have strawberries. I signed it Dorothy, and nothing else. Roy was waiting in the truck. Willa was in the passenger seat with the window down, sunglasses on, looking like a woman who had done something like this before and was entirely at peace with it. I locked the front door with my key, then put the key on top of the envelope. I walked to the truck. The morning was cool and clean, the kind of April air that feels like permission. The oak tree at the end of the driveway was fully leafed out, dense and green. I had watched it bud from my side yard window all March, and I was glad I had not missed it. I did not look back, not because it didn't matter, but because I had already decided that forward was the only direction left that made any sense. The house at the Harlow place was smaller than my room at Nathan's had been. That is the right way to measure it, not against the house I had helped buy, but against the space that had actually been given to me. By that measure, the house was enormous. 1 main room, a kitchen along one wall, a bedroom behind a French door, a bathroom with a window that caught the afternoon sun, a small porch just wide enough for 2 chairs. Out front, the window box was empty, waiting. Willa helped me unpack the kitchen. She knew where everything should go without asking, the way old friends do. We made sandwiches on my own cutting board and ate them standing at the counter, and she told me about Pearl and Claudette and a woman named Harriet who had moved in the previous autumn and had recently installed a raised garden bed that was already producing radishes. I said I was going to plant strawberries. She said, "I know," you said. We laughed. It had been a while since I laughed without deciding first whether it was appropriate. The calls started that evening. I recognized the number. I let the first one go, and the second. Renee's voicemail was short and careful, the voice of someone trying to remain composed. "Dorothy, we need to talk about this. Please call back." Nathan's came an hour later. His voice was different, not composed, not careful. He sounded like the boy he had been once, before everything, and the sound of it pressed on a part of me I was trying to keep steady. "Mom, I don't understand. Please just call me, okay? Just call me." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that one. I did not call back that night. I had said what needed to be said in the letter. The rest would have to wait until everyone had had time to sit with it. Instead, I unfolded my mother's quilt on the bed, made myself a cup of tea with my own kettle in my own kitchen, and stood at the porch door watching the last of the light go out over the oak trees. A woman I didn't know yet was watering a pot of herbs 2 houses down. She looked up and waved, simple and unguarded, the way people wave when they are not performing anything. I waved back. 3 days passed. I unpacked the books and lined them on the shelf. I bought soil from the hardware store 2 streets over. I found a local bakery on the main road and had a blueberry scone on Friday morning at a table by the window, alone, for the first time in 14 months, without feeling that I was taking up space someone else needed. On Saturday morning, a knock at my door. I opened it to find Bea on my front step, backpack on, wearing the yellow rain boots she wore in all weather from October through May. Behind her, at the end of the stone path, Nathan's car was parked. He was standing beside it, hands in his pockets, not approaching. Bea said, "Daddy drove me. He said I could knock." I said, "Come in." She came in and looked around with the specific attention children give to new places, taking inventory, checking if the world was how she had imagined it. She looked at the books on the shelf. She looked at the quilt on the bed, through the French door. She looked at the window box. "Your strawberries aren't there yet," she said. I said, "Give me 3 weeks." She seemed satisfied. She sat down at the kitchen table, and I made her hot chocolate, the real kind, which she watched me make with focused interest and zero pretense. We talked about her reading group at school and a disagreement she had with a girl named Marisol about whose turn it was to feed the class fish, a matter she presented with considerable legal detail. After an hour, she stood up and said, "I have to go back. Daddy's waiting." At the door, she turned and looked up at me. Her face was 6 years old and entirely serious. "Are you happy here, Grandma Dot?" I looked at my kitchen, the blue bowl from Savannah, on the counter, Gerald's lamp in the corner, my books on the shelf, the empty window box that was about to have something in it. I said, "Yes, I really am." She said, "Good," and went back down the path to her father. Nathan looked up when she came to him. He looked at me across the small yard, and I looked back, and neither of us said anything for a moment. Then he gave one slow nod, the kind that is not agreement but acknowledgement, and he opened the car door for Bea, and they drove away. I stood on the porch after the car was gone. The morning was warming up, the oak trees along the path turning gold and green in the light. Pearl was working in her garden at the far end of the circle, moving slowly and deliberately, talking to something low to the ground. I went inside, got my coat, and drove to the nursery. I came home with 2 flats of strawberry starts, a bag of good soil, and a small pot of lavender because it had been near the door, and I had wanted it without knowing why. I planted everything that afternoon. The window box first, the lavender in the center, the strawberry starts to either side. Then I sat on the porch step with my hands dirty and my coat still on, and I thought about all the rooms I had made myself small to fit inside. This room fit me. A woman named Harriet walked past on the path and saw me on the step and said, "New?" I said, "Just moved in." She said, "Harlow Place has a way of finding the right people," and kept walking without requiring a response. I pulled a small smear of soil from my wrist and looked at my hands, the same hands that had written the check, carried the boxes, folded 14 months of other people's laundry, and found the folder in the closet that changed everything. The same hands that had packed the blue bowl, driven to the nursery, and pressed strawberry starts into new soil on a Saturday in April. These hands were mine. Everything they had made had been mine. It had just taken me too long to act like it. I stayed on the step until the light shifted, and the garden cast a long shadow over the path. Then I went inside, washed my hands, made tea, and opened the journal I had not written in since Gerald died. On the first page, I wrote the date, and below it I wrote, "Today I planted something in a place where it will actually grow." Then I sat in the chair by the window with my tea cooling on the sill, and I watched the lavender move in the afternoon breeze, small and certain, and entirely where it was supposed to be.